What's up, everybody? I've been in the garage all morning trying to get two projects done. The first project is a tire cart. So I'm tired of carrying all my tires. You can see a lot of them right up there behind me. All my tires from the garage to the trailer, to the back of the truck, to the garage, to the trailer, to the car, to the garage, to the truck. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of carting all these things around. I gotta bring like 10 tires to each event now, and I'm getting old, so it's really wearing on me, to be honest. So I'm building a tire cart. And what do I mean by that? I know it's tough to tell now, but if you can imagine all this tube put together in the form of a shelf, kind of like these, that hold tires with casters on the bottom, that's what I'm building. And the idea is that I can just roll it into the trailer and roll it out of the trailer. Right now I have this solution in the trailer to hold a bunch of tires, but it's basically just two 2x4s across the trailer itself, and it really splits the front of the trailer from the back of the trailer when the car's not in it. When the car's in it, it's fine. They just kind of sit over the hood. But when the car's not in it, you can't really go from back to forth without having to duck under it. So I want to get rid of that and just roll my tires in and roll them out when I'm at the track and roll them in when I get home and roll them back to the trailer when I go to the track. So that's the idea behind project number one. So I'm just waiting on a couple plates for the casters that I had laser cut to come in, and then I'll weld that whole thing together and that project will be done. The other project I have here in the garage is Travis's car. Travis has got an E92 that he wants me to do all the tube work on. Since I've been posting all this tube work of my car, I'm familiar with the E92. I do tube rears and tube fronts seemingly a few times a year now, so he came all the way from South Carolina, dropped his car off last week. I got all the tube in, and all morning I've been cutting, grinding, and welding this tube together to spare you guys some long, agonizing time watching me just do monotonous things. But now all the tube's cut and ready to go. So I'm going to show you guys how I cut off the back of the car when I do these tube rears. And then we can start making the structure and welding it together so there's actually something fun to watch. So what we got here, this is the piece of metal that's going to go across here. That's one frame rail, there's the other frame rail. It's going to go across here to basically make the starting position for our tube rear. Our tube rear is going to be just like mine. It's going to be square tube out to here, over to here, and back to here. But I've learned a ton about how to design these things since I did mine. So it's going to be a little bit different from mine. And first, if you guys remember mine, that was a long time ago now, I actually didn't do two tubes like this in the back. I cut the frame rails and then plated them and then welded straight to those to create the tube structure. But now I do it this way because if you're in a very serious accident in the back of your car, you want these two tubes there to keep your frame rails and your rear strut towers sturdy. So this needs to be a very strong point of the car. So now I run these two tubes all the way across the two frame rails. And secondly, you don't have to make these really weird shaped plates with your angle grinder. So two benefits. In fact, in this project, Travis's project, I am trying not to make any plates with an angle grinder. I am not trying to make mounting points with an angle grinder. I'm not trying to make anything that I have to cut 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch steel out of because it's just painful. I don't want to drill any holes through that stuff. I don't want to cut any of it with an angle grinder. I don't want to be out here all day doing it. So the first thing I did was I cut all this tube out, and this is the piece that goes across here, and I have to find out where I'm going to cut these frame rails. So Travis already cut like a bunch of out of the back of his car, but I have to cut a little bit more to put these in the right spot. So I use this to kind of draw the line so I get a nice straight line all the way across. And the way I get a straight line, not a diagonal line, is actually I pick a position on the side. If you look really close here, you can see that there's a tab right here that holds this piece of metal in. But that tab holds that piece in. So I want to be just on the outside of that tab. I drew a line up. I made sure it was plumb and it was perpendicular to the frame rail here. And then I started with that mark and ran this tube across. So of course I did the same on this side of this frame rail. So I know that this is a nice straight line all the way across here, and I can take my angle grinder and cut it right out. This guy, I cleaned off all the scale so that I could weld it straight to this guy. something like that. And then over here, I went over and I welded this whole thing together. So this is ready just to weld to the car. And the reason I do that is so that I can level it and make sure the whole thing is square on here and not like, you know, weld here and then it cocks this way and then weld over here and then it's totally off by the time I get to here. So I welded it all up on the floor. And the only thing I'm doing is welding this to the car and then that guy to this, and I can level it with these jack stands. Fuck, this is stupid. All right, everybody, so I got the rear end stuff all welded up and tacked in and basically all designed and bent and cut and notched and everything. So let me show you what I did in the rear here, and I actually got some stuff done in the front too, so I'll show you that as well. All right, so here's the rear end. You can see these are the pieces that were on the floor. This is the piece that I welded to the back, but then I also added these kind of like Mickey Mouse ears for the sides, and they're mounted to, these are actually leaf spring brackets, and I found those on Summit. So I made these kind of bunny ears for each side, and the reason for that is if you get hit, they rotate in, and they don't like crush everything else here, so it gives you a nice kind of crash structure. And they're pretty big, but they don't go all the way against the bumper here to give you a little more room just to push up against them. And then I got the kind of, it's a bash bar, but it's kind of just like a bumper holder, which is this bar right here. So this bar bolts into the top through a bolt on the top. And doesn't really honestly do much besides hold the bumper up. I don't know why we have to even have these anymore. But yeah, that's what I came up with for the back. And for the front, you can see I have the front bash bar bent. I just got to cut the ends a little shorter. I have the standoffs notched, but I got to cut those a little shorter. And I got the frame rail plates. Those I get laser cut from an outside source. So I get these laser cut off little design off the computer. Weld them to this guy right here. Weld this guy to this guy right here. And the front bash bar is basically done. Travis wants a jack point, so we're going to try to put a jack point in there somewhere. But yeah, if you're wondering how I made this really long, you know, huge radius bend here, let me show you. I made it with this medieval torture device looking thing. Basically, this is a tubing roller. And you rotate this, there's some dies in here, and you move this down little by little. It's kind of tight. You move it down little by little, and you get these like really long bends out of them. So this I can use to kind of match the contour of the bumper. So today I want to finish up that front bash bar. A lot of the stuff in the back is just tacked in. There's a couple things to add on back there. So I want to get those finish welded. And there's a lot of like kind of, I call it rod work, but I have to use 3/8 rod to make things for like headlight brackets and taillight brackets and radiator brackets and all that stuff. So I might get into that today too. You always want to make sure these two posts that hold the bash bar in place are basically dead even. And I got it on the most even surface I have. Another crucial part about making a bash bar is making sure these tubes are square to the plate so they're not crooked or anything and your bash bar doesn't sit all wonky on the front of the frame rails, but also that the rotation of this tube is correct with the notch. So we want to make sure that kind of the short side of this notch is on the outside because we have a big curve, and also that the notch itself is centered to the plate. And of course I just do that with some magnets. And we're looking pretty good. You guys can't really see it because my arms are getting all crossed up here, but trust me, it's square. Alright, so we got Travis's bash bar all mocked up and tacked up here. Take a look. Looks pretty good. I'll show you a little closer here and explain some stuff. I made it a little bit longer than mine, so he doesn't need the pool noodle that mine needs in the front to keep the bumper up. This contour matches the bumper really, really nice. And I made these ends shorter, so from this bend to here is a lot shorter than mine. Well, not a lot, maybe 2 inches or 3 inches shorter than mine. And that's because every time you get hit here, if it's longer than this, it bends right here. And when it bends, if this is nice and long, it goes straight into your tire and then you can't move the car. So I made this shorter so that when it bends in here somewhere, and maybe you won't be able to steer depending on how hard you hit it, but at least it won't be stuck in the tire and you get a little movement. All right, so I got the whole bash bar tacked up and I added this guy. So I added this guy. This guy just holds up the bumper. I just tack it to there and it'll hold up the bumper. I'll put a couple quick disconnects like my car has here so that we just push a button and the bumper comes off, and maybe zip ties in the fenders or something. I'm not sure yet. All right, so next thing we got to do is cut the kind of fender rails off from the strut towers, get rid of all the stuff that's in the way, and put some bars from the strut tower to the frame rail, which keeps it kind of just sturdy and kind of supports the frame rail behind the crumple zone. So we don't want the strut tower bending for any reason. So we give it a little bit of space for it to crumple, but I mean, if you're getting in a huge accident where you've crushed the bash bar, the frame rail, and everything else, these bars are mostly for mounting the headlights in comparison to getting in such a huge accident that you're not going to bend your strut towers. So I put them there mostly to, first of all, it looks cool. Secondly, you got to hold up the headlights somehow and build off of something so that you have kind of rod or something coming off to hold the headlights in place. And it does offer some more support to those strut towers. All right, so these are probably the last two things I'll do today. I got to cut this massive thing off. And what's interesting is actually these are supported by another bar that goes to the frame rail already. So the bar we're adding is kind of just replacing this and that, but making a little more room here as well. And some, space, something to mount other rods and things we need too. So, yeah, next thing is to just chop these off. Well guys, I made a mistake. I went ahead and made these bars from the frame rails to the strut towers to support the strut towers in the case of an accident, but also to mount headlights and the radiator and stuff off of. But if we look, this one is just about 2.5 inches from the frame rail end. And this one, if it focuses, is 3 inches. So I made some mistake when I measured this one. I might have measured it from the outside or something, but I didn't measure it the same, and now I got to move this back, which means shortening it, or I can use this one that I made over here that I thought was too short. I just copied this one opposite and made this one, and I came up too short over there, and now I'm thinking it's because where I drew this line is in the wrong spot, because if it was back here it probably wasn't too short. I remade this whole thing to hit this line that I've drawn on here wrong. Alright guys, let's do a little bit of a check-in here. I basically finished up all the rod work. After the rod work, it's on to tab work. So we did the tube work, then we did the rod work, now we're doing the tab work after that. I had to make kind of a mount for his radiator and some kind of mounts for his headlights, or places to put mounts for his headlights. So let me show you what I did here and kind of how I did it and why, or what the thought process was on doing it the way I did it. Alright, so as you can see, the bash bar's got rods on it. We have some tubes from the fenders to the frame rails. They have rods on them. And all this is just for mounting the bumper, the radiator, the headlights, things like that. So I guess we'll start with the headlights and we'll go from there. We have our tube from here to the frame rail. This just supports the strut tower. Then we have these rods here. This angle here follows the inside of this fender, and then it follows the back of the headlight. So we can put a couple tabs off the headlight here, so that we can just mount the headlight to those tabs. Then it goes down to that node there on this kind of strut bar. But the angle at which it goes down is specific, because if you look, it's the angle for that tab on the radiator. So it's a little bit different from mine, because this angle is different on mine. But I wanted to make it the same as that radiator so I wouldn't have to make some funky looking tab or twist anything. Now I can just put a single bend in it and it'll mount right there. It'll probably just come down, bend flat. There'll be a rubber grommet in between there, and that'll mount the radiator. And it's the same on the other side. So the other side is the same, exactly the same actually. Same angle, same everything. One thing I didn't mention on the other side is we'll put hood pins like here, maybe in this spot, or I think mine hang off over here somewhere because I wanted them on a specific spot on the hood. But somewhere along here we'll put hood pins depending on where Travis wants them. And the last thing that's really different than mine is obviously the radiator's in the front. My radiator's in the back. So we had to make this kind of tray for the radiator to sit in. And actually I thought this was pretty clever because there's a bolt right here underneath the bash bar. It's really hard to make anything substantial underneath the bash bar because you got to be able to get that bolt in. So I used these 2 pieces of rod, came across the bottom, and I used a couple pieces of rod, so you can see across there to keep the width correct. But the radiator sits down in between those 2 rods, so it sits between those. So this rod will act as kind of the centering point for the front and the back of the radiator. These rods coming this way will act as the centering point for the radiator side to side. And then underneath there, I'm going to put a tray that we can put kind of, and by tray I mean a piece of sheet metal, that we can put some kind of rubber matting on, so this isn't solid mounted or anything, it's just kind of floating there, because we don't want any kind of like stress points on the aluminum. We want to protect the radiator from any type of like bouncing or anything by doing that. Also, it'll expand and contract, and you know, if you hard mount it, it'll crack or break or something will bend or whatever. So yeah, that brings us to the radiator. So the radiator, we want it as far back as we can get it to have some nice crush room in front of it so nothing can happen to it. It's got plenty of safety space so that nothing goes into it, because this is like the #1 thing that takes people out of drift days, is that they get something in their radiator and then it leaks and then they can't fix it and they are done for the day. So we wanted it as far back and as safe as possible, but we still needed some space to get in here and change the belts. So Travis has got this really nice LSE90 bracketry here, or LSE9X bracketry, and we want to make sure he can get his hands in here and change the belts and make sure there's plenty of room here for the fans, and they need to do their thing. But also we need some space for the intake, and he's got a nice coolant tank that will go over here, I think. So we need to make sure there was some space to be able to work in there. That's why we left just a 2x4 worth of space there. And the height is basically as high as we could get it being up front. So it's basically level with where the headlights go. And there's a little coolant port on the back of the radiator right here. It's actually a pretty nice radiator. This is the bleed port, so this will bleed up to his coolant tank. So that needed to be a little bit higher than kind of the steam port area over here. The coolant tank will be higher anyway, so. Alright, so we got all the tabs cut, cleaned up, tacked on, and kind of everything in the front end in place. There's a couple more things to do out back. I just have to make the jack point and the bumper support bar, so I'll do that after this. But now I got to pull the front fenders off and go ahead and weld all these little tabs in that I made for things like the headlights and the fenders themselves and the hood pins and the radiator and things like that. So let me show you. We got this long bracket here. That'll be for, his fender's broken, but that'll be for a bolt that goes here. You can see it on the other side. That bolt there, headlight, and then a hood pin somewhere between. So I gotta weld this all the way up and underneath the fender there. The radiator sitting like it will. You can see the tabs from the top here. One right there, another one over here. And I use these like kind of like rubber nuts to isolate the radiator from kind of everything. Although this stuff's pretty flimsy, to be honest, so I think it would have been fine. And it's sitting on a really thick piece of foam at the bottom there in the tray, so I welded kind of a plate of metal in the tray. I left the ends open so water could fall out, but yeah, there's a little rubber mat under there too, so this thing's pretty, I mean, this thing's pretty sturdy, and I just hand tighten. I can move the whole car by it actually. So yeah, looking pretty good. Pull the fenders off, weld this, weld those. Actually, I think that's it. Just weld those before it's too dark, and then move on to the back, clean that stuff up, and we're done with this project. Is it recording? Oh, it is recording. All right, people, so Travis's car is finally done. We just finished all of the tab work. We put spots for hood pins, spots for trunk pins, stuff to hold his radiator up, stuff to hold his headlights up, and let me walk you through it a little bit and show you kind of the finished result, and we'll go from there. All right, we got some good lighting from outside here today. So yeah, Travis's headlights were missing tabs, so I just made some aluminum straps to hold his headlights up. But basically this tab right here, this long tab, is for this bolt in the fender, the headlight bolts, and then wherever Travis wants to put the hood pins, he can put it in this tab right here. Radiator held on by the two tabs with the rubber mounts. I already showed you guys that. Down there, oh, it's kind of tough to see. Let's see if we can go this way and see it. Down here, you can see there's kind of like a little tray the radiator sits in. Radiator sits up higher than stock and further back. Underneath the headlights, there's one tab. Let's see if we can, you might be able to see it. Right, geez, right there. So that's the tab that holds up the bottom of the headlight, and the headlight just kind of like sits into it, so you don't really have to, you know, mess with the bolt or anything. You just loosen it up and pull the headlight upward. And then of course the two top tabs. Actually, this headlight had one top tab but not the other, so I had to make a little aluminum strap for that. And actually everything fits pretty nicely. We put the hood down here. You know, for it being all tube in the back, I don't think it looks too bad at all. I know there's a shadow on it, but that's how it goes sometimes. We've got toe strap. That toe strap guy is not just drilled through the tube, it's mounted on a bolt that the nut was welded into the tube, so that's nice and strong. Let's see. Oh, the bumper. I didn't show you the bumper quick releases. So we got a couple quick releases on the bumper. This is actually a factory square hole. I just drilled it out a little bit and put these quick releases here. So it makes it real easy to take it off. And then on the sides, we just have those little, like, rubber band. Oh man, the shadow's bad. These little rubber band things holding on to the side. Headlights line up pretty good, I'd say, especially for a car that's just tube in the front. And yeah, I am pretty happy with this. I think Travis will be pretty happy too. This is pretty extravagant, honestly. Pretty extravagant design, I'd say. I mean, it's simple but complicated at the same time, you know, things like the angle of this bar matching the angle of the radiator tab here, so that this tab just comes out into the side so it looks symmetrical, and kind of how the radiator is mounted, how the headlights are mounted, how the bash bar fits inside the bumper. So if you guys remember, the bash bar is actually curved along with the curve of the bumper, and it sits right against it. There's nothing really holding this bumper up besides tension, which is really nice. Mine needed a pool noodle in front, but this one doesn't because I made it a little bit longer. And then if we walk around to the back here, we got more fun, cool stuff. So, let's see if I can get far enough away here. Square tubing kind of frame. This is kind of the strong portion, is just kind of square with the corners cut off. We have a jack point. We have one bash bar, which basically just holds up the bumper. And then we have these two like butterfly wings out here. And those are meant to be replaceable. So if you really get deep into a wall, you just replace this piece. And they're mounted to these really thick brackets that I found. We have mounts for the trunk pins, so Travis can just drill a hole wherever he wants the trunk pin along this 3-inch kind of plate here. And the pin will go up and through the trunk, just like mine do. And yeah, so looks pretty proud of this side too. We just gotta put the bumper back on, and I think we can call this project finished. Travis picked up some really cool parts from LSE9X here. Looks like a coolant expansion tank. This tank's pretty nice. Powder coated, nice welds on the corners. Nice fittings. Nice job, LSE9X. It's supposed to go like here in a stock car, but obviously there's some bars and stuff in the way now in this car. So not only that, his bleed port for his radiator is actually on this side right there, that little bung there. So maybe he can put it, you know, like this. That's a pretty cool spot, I think. And that'll fit just fine. I'll just make a tab off that corner there. Maybe a tab for that other one there. And real short bleed line up to the highest point in the cooling system. This is a pretty good spot, I'd say. And Travis picked up an intake. I think he's planning on running an LSA supercharger, if I remember right. So that bracket there obviously goes to the head, probably about here. And I think he said LSA, especially because the LSAs have crooked kind of outputs. So like the throttle body doesn't sit straight off of it, so that would make this sit straight. And you can see LSE9X there. Another pretty beautiful piece from Mike over there. I wish you had an intake manifold so I could actually put it on and see where it would sit, where this filter is going to sit, because it does look a little crowded over in this area. I wonder what his plan is, but yeah, I'm sure you can make something work. But that's going to look pretty freaking cool, I'd say. So, the next and final job on the list is to take all the body panels and headlights and everything off one last time and just check everything over, clean up the tubes with some acetone, check for any welding slag that is stuck or sharp. I don't want to leave that there. And yeah, put all the body panels back on. Travis is coming tomorrow to pick this thing up. I think he's going to be pretty pleased with it. We'll see. It's quite a bit nicer than mine. Even though it looks very similar to mine, it's quite a bit nicer and more thought out. And just I had a lot more experience this time, so came out pretty nice, I'd say. I think he's going to be happy. So that's it. She's all done. Overall, I'd say I'm pretty proud of this project. It makes me want to redo my car the way I did this car. And the only reason I did this car this way is because of how much I learned on my own car. So it's kind of a, I don't know what they call that. But it makes me want to redo my own car. So I probably won't do that until I crash, since this is a ton of work. I mean, tons of work. But yeah, maybe in the future I'll make it like his car.
Freaking pumped, man. Stoked.
Yeah, what do you think about it?
I appreciate it, man. No, it's freaking killer. It's absolutely sick. It's honestly way more than I expected. Dude did a stand-up job.